Hello, everybody. It's John Browning at Guardian Rock Wealth on the Building Your Life podcast. We do this once a week, and we come to you with what we think is going to provide some value to you. So listen in and feel free to go back and look at past episodes as well. Everyone that has listened to this before already knows this, but really quickly, the way that you can best get in touch with me is to text the word LIFE, L-I-F-E, to 21,000, or go out to the web and go to guardianrockwealth.com. Hit the contact page. I'm happy to talk to anyone, and it costs absolutely zero to speak with me for a little while. I'm happy to do that if I can add some value to your life. But normally we have Michael DeLon on with us, and today we have given him the day off again, and we have with us Alex. And Alex, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I'm very excited to have you on the show and learn a little bit more about this. We have talked about the idea of estate planning, inheritance, legacy planning, all of those things on the show before. I think you've even met one of our podcast guests and talked with her, Cindy Arledge. Anybody wants to tune into that, you can do a search on our podcast website and find that. But Alex has been in this business for over a decade now. You've been in the legal business, and you've got some great things to share with us. But just to start out, could you tell us a little bit about not just sort of what you do, but more about why you do it?
Yes, absolutely. So thanks, John, so much for having me on the show. I'm really happy to be here. Cindy was really wonderful. I'm glad you connected us. That is something that you clearly do well. You are a connector. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to meet and work with her a little bit and to get to know you a little bit better. So in terms of what I do, yes, I am an attorney. I have been an attorney for about 11 years now. Coming up on, this is my 11th year, because I think I went in November of 2010, and how time has flown. I began in litigation. Which is, just that is exactly what it sounds like. It's lawsuits, and it's a lot of fights, and it's a lot of court and all kinds of stuff like that. And I worked in that part of the law practice on the civil side, and I found success in that side of the practice, but I also found dissatisfaction because of the hours, because of the acrimony that you have with the opponents that you face in court. Sometimes the acrimony is with judges. You try to stay on their good side as much as possible, but some just are not interested to hear anything about that. And so what I really found that was not the best place for me to spend my time and use my law degree and license. I found that I didn't really want to fight, that I liked something that was creative. I wanted something that was like cooperative. I wanted something that was about building something. And so that's how I ultimately found my way. And after dabbling with it a bit in some of the law firms that I've worked for here in Chicago in the past, and I'm located in Chicago, I found my way to what most people think of and call estate planning, but what I think of and call inheritance planning, which I think it's expressing a larger concept of what you are actually passing along to those people that you care about, or those institutions that you care about most in the world. And so to really illustrate, I think, the difference between what I was doing in litigation and what I do now in planning is that really what you're doing when you hire a lawyer to litigate for you, to file lawsuits for you, I think what you're actually doing is paying that person to make your problem their problem. And they have to solve that problem for you, and they're probably going to charge you a lot of money to do that.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will. You sound like you might know something about that.
I do know a little bit about that, yeah.
And that's the problem, right? Like sometimes the problems that you face legally are not of your own making. In fact, often they're going to be somebody else's making, but it's still your problem, and you still have to deal with it, which is to say you still have to pay a lot of money to have somebody else deal with it. And it's never an experience that makes anybody happy. You know, like even when clients win, it was my experience that they were just so, you know, relieved to be done with the whole process of it, that, you know, it just like they were happy to win, but it just kind of felt like it really extracted a lot of their energy and their intention and so on. And like, you know, moments of their life that they're not going to get back, unfortunately. So you're paying for somebody, a lawyer, namely, to make your problem their problem. But in the case of planning, you would be paying an attorney like me to prevent you from ever having a problem in the first place. That's really what the focus of planning is. Litigation is about fixing, like cleaning up a mess that somebody made, really. I always thought about it as like really glorified janitorial work. And, you know, except maybe if we're talking like about like really great, interesting constitutional kinds of issues or things like that. But most litigation is just cleaning up somebody else's mess. Here, again, we're preventing there from ever being a mess that happens because of thoughtful decisions that are presented by someone like me and made by somebody like you, about what they want to happen, plans they want, structures they want to have in place, documents that they want to have in place to kind of govern what happens to their financial wealth when they're no longer around. What happens in situations of emergency when they can't, for reasons having to do with a medical condition or something of the like, can't make conscious decisions for themselves anymore about financial decisions that they need to make, or financial matters they need to make, or health matters that they need to make. And also, and this goes back to what I was saying about the idea of a more holistic idea of inheritance versus estate, is what about the story that each person wants to tell about themselves? What is each person's story? What do they want people to know about them? You know, people that matter to them most in the world, their kids, their extended family, their friends, whatever. You know, what is the story that they want to know, and the ideas that they want to pass on, values that they might have in their own life that they want to inspire future generations with. All of that is part of an inheritance that will be passed on, and that is the work that I'm really attracted to doing. In fact, that's one of my favorite part of all of the work that I do with clients. It's that narrative aspect of it. So that's what really attracted me. I'm somebody who has a story, has a background in a degree of like drama and storytelling. I studied for a couple of years at the Second City improvisational comedy.
Yeah.
I was an English literature major. I read a ton of Shakespeare and went to untold numbers of plays and have watched and can throw down, at least with a lot of people. Maybe not the true cinephiles out there, but I know my movies really well. And so it's just an idea of story that I'm really attracted to. And this is a way to do that while using my law degree. So that's really great. And that was what really, really, you know, compelled me to look at this area of law and find my way to its practice.
Yeah, there's a couple parallels in there that if I can take them out, and you tell me if I'm doing this wrong. But yeah. One thing I thought of as you were talking is just about, well, they've even made it a law now, right? That you have to have health insurance. Yep. So people buy health insurance, people buy life insurance, and that's part of what we do here at Guardian Rock, is we do comprehensive wealth management. We focus ourselves on managing the money, but that's not all of your wealth, right? And the other part of wealth management is putting people in touch with people like you and insurance agents, and the right insurance agents, the right legal people, the right tax people that have the correct long experience to make sure that bad things don't happen later on because they haven't prepared now.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the thing. And when I speak with people, I find that not very many people have really thought through, first of all, the idea of what they want their best life to be, but then certainly not what their end of life planning is going to be.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, a lot of times we've gone and we've chased the dollar, we've chased the career, we've tried to grab everything that we can. And then all of a sudden we get to the end of our life and there's a cliff and there's the end. And it's like,
where did it all go?
Where did it all go? Why did I do that? What was I doing this whole time?
I think one of my one of my favorite things I've heard recently is, I think from a study that was conducted, um, where people were asked questions towards the end of their life, in particular about regrets and what regrets they might have, if any. And the number one reported regret was, I worked way too much.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, maybe you achieved some level of financial wealth that you were always chasing after, but you got there and then you're like, but what else? What is it? You know, okay, so I won that part of the game, but why does it not feel like I won the whole thing? You know, because you ignored a lot of really important other aspects of your life, maybe because you never reflected seriously and dug deep and tried to figure out what is it you really need beyond just the dollar that you're earning. You know, what else did you need in your life? And if you don't ask those questions, you probably put yourself in a position where you're more likely to end up with regrets towards the end. I shouldn't have worked as much. I should have gone on all those vacations I really wanted to, but I decided that I wasn't going to, or I should have learned the guitar, or whatever it might be. You know, I just didn't make the time for it because there was always the excuse of, I have to work, I have these responsibilities, I have to make more money, I have to do this. But by the way, you know, a really great aspect, and I think this is why the work that you and I do, though different, is mutually reinforcing. Because I think that if there's somebody who comes into my office and we start talking about questions of story and who are you and where are you going and where do you want to be at the end of all of this, what do you want people to remember you for, that naturally begs the question, if you were to pass away tomorrow, right, are you ready? Would people, do you think the things that you want them to think about you? Would you be remembered in the way that you want to be remembered? Do you even know how you want to be remembered? But if the answer to that question, no, I don't think that I would be remembered if I die tomorrow the way that I really want to be. Well, then that naturally begs the question, well, what do we need to do to get you there?
Yeah.
What do you need to do differently? And that's a conversation that I think I can have with people. And I think that's a conversation that you can have with people, you know, like we are, I think, very much two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. And it's also this idea that there's people that think they can do, you know, these things by themselves, and they can if they're smart individuals, right? They can go out on the website, they can go to YouTube, they can figure it out.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you put a football in my hands, it's worth about $20, right?
Yeah.
If you put it in Drew Brees' hand, it's worth about 20 million bucks, right? If you know how you want to be remembered, if you know what your best life, and maybe you haven't thought about it, but when you do think about it, and I encourage everybody to really think deeply about this, then do you want to sort of do it yourself, or would you rather put those tools, the money, the legal aspect, the tax, all those things that go into it, would you want it in Drew Brees' hands, or would you want it in you after you watched a few YouTube videos or did an internet search, right? Are you really going to end up with that masterpiece that you really want?
Yeah, an algorithm is never going to care that much about you. It's not that smart. It's not that sophisticated, right?
Right.
And it's not going to know you. It's not going to, you know, be able to sense things about you. It's not going to be able to have heartfelt conversations with you. So yeah, that it's, you know, if you're looking for absolutely the bare minimum and as cheap an option as you possibly can get, sure, I guess, you know, that's a choice. It's a choice that you can make. But I think that what people who do the kind of work that you and I do offer is that it's the relationship side of things that you know, that you can have with clients that make the extra money that those clients have to pay to work with you so much more worthwhile, right? I think like a lot of clients who I worked with have felt like they didn't pay enough. Like I didn't ask that, like, are you sure this is it? Like, because it feels like there's in my experience, like I end up having like really good relationships with clients. You know, and I think that, you know, what you can't really put a price on that, especially, by the way, if you're talking about somebody who's not just going to be with you temporarily just to get some stuff done, but somebody who the proposition is, no, 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 like we're going to establish a relationship for as long as you want to, right? As long as you want to keep calling me and you want to keep talking and you want to stay in touch and you want me to give you advice and so on, I'm here for that. My idea is, and we say this on our website, and my law firm is called Alexandros LLC. But what we say on our website, alexllc.co, for those who are interested to check it out. But what you'll see right at the beginning, like right at the homepage when you go, is it's counsel for life. I'm not going to be your lawyer. I'm going to be your counsel is kind of how I want people to think about it. And I'm not just here to make some documents for you. What I'm here to do is I'm here to kind of shepherd you through a process and ask you a set of questions that you will answer. And at the end of which you will feel confident about what you want. You'll know where things are going, and you'll feel more in control than you did prior to meeting me and doing this work together. You know, that once we're done with that first phase, which is where most of the work happens, beyond that, then I'm staying involved. We might not talk on a regular basis, but anytime you want to call, anytime you want to email, anytime you have a question about, or anytime you're seeing changes that need to be reflected in the planning that we do, I'm here for that, right? And I know that your relationship with clients is actually quite similar.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's switch gears here just a little bit. And I often get the question, I love to work with all different types of people. So I'll work with people like the families that maybe aren't quite big enough to be a family office in and of themselves, but they're sort of just below that threshold, but they need some financial. I'll work with those really high net worth folks, and they're fun to work with, right? And then I work with the retirees or pre-retirees that just have maybe a few $100,000, and they're trying to figure out, oh, nuts, I didn't plan for my best life. How do I catch up?
Right.
And I have another subsection where they're younger.
Yeah.
They may be in their 20s. I have I don't make a lot of money at this, but I have a lot of fun at this. I have sort of a 20 somethings, and they don't generally have a lot of assets, but they're fun to work with because I only will work with the 20 somethings that are truly dedicated to making a difference and building that foundation and are really willing to do the work required to build that awesome foundation. And those guys are the guys that are really going to get ahead because they got their whole lives ahead of them and they've started out with a good base.
Yeah.
But those 20 somethings, when I say to them, usually on the third or fourth meeting, because I have a program where I meet once a month with them, and I kind of just coach them. They don't have any assets under management or anything, but I just coach them on how to get started.
Yeah.
On about the third meeting, we start talking about, do you have a will?
Yeah.
Do you have a power of attorney? And do you have all the powers of attorneys that you need? And first of all, they usually say, well, I know what a will is, but why the heck would I need one? And then they say, what in the world is a power of attorney? And you mean there's two of them? Yeah. two main ones. I'm sure there's more than that.
Yeah.
But what would you say to a 20-something person, or even an 18-year-old maybe, who is just getting started, and they say, why in the world would I need a will or a power of attorney?
Well, first and foremost, the reason is because tomorrow is just not promised. You know, I think when we're 20 or thereabouts, you know, like it feels like you do. I mean, sure, like if all things go well, you do have your whole life and you could have like this long, prosperous life ahead of you. Yeah. And you think, oh, well, I mean, I've got all this time and it's not really, it's kind of a downer topic to talk about. Why do I really want to, you know, even be like worrying about this stuff right now? Especially if you don't have a ton of assets, you know, that's another reason to, I guess, suppose not do it. However, like if you only look at it as something financial, sure. Because really, like if you have a very small amount of assets, you know, I guess that's the thing. Like the assumption is, well, whatever, my family will just sort it out or something like that.
Right.
maybe you're okay with that, but maybe you're not okay with that, because what happens is if you don't have any planning whatsoever, is that the law has planning that it puts in place for you
that you might not like.
and you might not like. You might not care, but maybe but I think a lot of people who don't necessarily care about this haven't really thought it through. That's the experience that I get. And then what I do is like I run people through scenarios. Like, okay, let's say that if you didn't do anything, if you left this meeting and you didn't want to work together, you just wanted to kind of keep things as they are, and you don't have any documents. Here is what would happen if you died tomorrow. Right. This is where this asset would go, and this and so on. And like I kind of like break down the whole thing for people. And that often does lead to results that they're not particularly happy with. And so that's exactly a reason. If you don't have a lot financially to speak of, that's a really good reason to plan. Now, the other thing that you mentioned, however, was questions of powers of attorney. Now, those are documents that you sign, that people sign, that empower someone other than them to stand in their shoes and make decisions for them, either in a financial context or in a healthcare context, or both, right? It can oftentimes, especially in like a spousal situation, right? The spouses are granting each other both of those powers of attorney, financial and healthcare related.
Right.
That's a really big deal, right? And I think especially like even if you're, if you don't have a lot of assets to speak of, financial, not such a big deal for power of attorney. But the one that is always a big deal is the healthcare power of attorney. Because no matter what assets you have, right, there's no asset that's more important than your health. Right. And it's your body, and you might want it to be treated in a certain way given certain circumstances, right? And it's not just end of life stuff, like should someone pull the plug or not, if you were in a certain condition, like an extended unconsciousness, but more so, and you had to be assisted in order to stay alive, in order to keep your vital systems, functioning. But it's also this question of mental health. Like in the state of Illinois, lawyers are expected to ask questions about the mental health preferences of their clients. Are there certain kinds of treatments that you might consent or explicitly not consent to in advance of potentially being offered them in the event that maybe you lost your marbles, either permanently or temporarily, or you just, like, again, we're in a situation a situation where you could not make competent decisions for yourself. What are your wishes in that situation? If you haven't expressed them, then, and you're, let's say you're either, recently married or you are not married, if you're married, then your spouse is probably going to be able to make those decisions for you, but you haven't had the conversation with them to tell them what you really want. Or, you, in the case of parents, right, that's a worst case scenario. If you were in a really critical situation, maybe, a situation where you're end of life and they have to make a decision. And the decision that your parents, if you have not planned, if you don't have any documents in place, and you haven't made a power of attorney determination, you're putting your parents in a situation where they have to make an impossible choice for you, which is to say, they brought you up they conceived you, they raised you, they invested all this time and effort and money and all this stuff. And you're saying to them, hey guys, I want you to decide whether or not I should come off of this machine. That's, and I hope that's not too upsetting to hear, but that's part of my job, is to actually present hard truths, and get people to confront them so that they can take action if they don't like how that situation would play out. Yeah. Right. So that's part of the value that I try to add, and the part of my job is to confront people with these difficult questions that I don't particularly like asking. I don't like to, I don't really love to dig into this stuff. The only reason I like it is that I think that it puts people in a better position than they would be had they not been confronted with the question.
So much easier to talk about it now than it would be to talk about it when that is actually going on. Yes, absolutely. Without question. Yeah. And you can think about, have that conversation with loved ones in a situation where you're fully conscious, you're young, you're healthy, you're vibrant, whatever.
now is exactly the right time to start thinking through some of these things and have that conversation with the people who matter most to you. Because part of the process of naming someone as your agent with power of attorney for either financial or medical or both, or naming someone who's going to be the executor of a will, or your trustee if you were to set up a trust for yourself, you're having to really think hard about who's my person, who can I trust to do this work, right? And it's really important. It's really important things to be thinking about. And people, I think, find it like really edifying to go through this and do this. There's no time like the present to do that, especially because tomorrow is not promised. To bring it all the way back around to the original.
There we go. I like that. The circle. We went all the way back there.
I find my way. I take a long circuitous route, but I find my way back eventually.
No, so the next question I get, right, and this is from, and I realize that a lot of what you just said will be the same, but I'll get from, say, the 40, 50, 60-year-old, right, the little bit later in their life. Well, I get two things. Number one, well, yeah, I probably should, but I'll do that someday, and I just haven't gotten around to it. Or you know what, yeah, I did that, I think, back in 1993, and I'm like, well, do you know where the documents are? Is a person who is your power of attorney still alive?
Yeah.
And we have that conversation. But what would you say to them, other than, all the stuff you just said about the 20-something still applies, right?
Yeah.
But what might you say to somebody that's in that type of position?
And to summarize, just that type of position is like a kind of categorically like what's about them. They did some planning, but they haven't really updated it. They don't know what the situation is right now. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I see two situations. One is, oh, gee, yeah, I probably should do that. I never have, and they're 50, 60, 70 years old.
Yeah.
The other is, I did that sometime.
Yeah.
And, and of course, usually the people in the first category that haven't done anything and haven't really thought about that or anything, I call those the someday I'll. They're going to retire on someday I'll. They're going to be with a lot of other people on someday I'll.
Yeah.
And it's someday I'll develop a financial plan. Someday I'll get a will and power of attorney. And someday and suddenly they're on someday I'll.
Yep.
They're retired there, and it's not a great place.
No, it's not. They're like, wow, how did I get here? I thought I had more time.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay, got it. So yes, so it's interesting. I'll actually start first with the second thing that you mentioned.
Okay.
Having a plan that you did a long time ago, and you're not really sure what's in it, and you haven't updated it ever. You just kind of put it on a shelf somewhere, or that's now like everything is I do almost everything digital, even though when people work with me, they get paper because you have to. There has to be a hard copy, but you store it wherever you store your stuff, and you haven't really looked at it. I won't go so far as to say that's as bad as not having anything whatsoever, but it's not that far off, because when you think about how much life can change in just a year. People come and go, society changes, the whole world can change overnight, right? Like planning is something that when you do the first time, it should be revisited every few years, right? 2 to 3 years. Actually, that's one of the things that I do. I charge flat fees for people to work with me. And then they get what we build into that model, the ongoing relationship, which guarantees each client at least every 3 years an update to any and all documents that require updating.
I'm gonna time out here, because you just said something that I don't think I have ever heard from, definitely not an independent legal advisor, lawyer. You said the words, I work on a flat fee, and that includes, and a whole long, like every 3 years. That's significant. I just want to say that doesn't, I don't hear that very often, especially in the legal profession. So
it's a new model that I think is increasingly being taken up by attorneys who are on the younger side. And what we've seen, obviously, is what it does is, and I think what frustrates a lot of people, and I've worked at firms like this, by the way, where there's no transparency in the billing process. And all of a sudden you just get this massive,
Yes.
wait a minute, we just had, okay, so we had a 15-minute, you took 15 minutes to respond to an email from me, and we had a phone call, and and suddenly there's like a several $1,000 bill in the mail. Like, what the hell happens? And how is this at all justified? And are there no standards? Like, where do it, so it's the kind of the same thing that people go through. I think there's just like how, like like when you're getting medical care in the US, it's like, well, what the hell, what is this bill? What is the,
Yeah, where did this come from? Didn't I just pay this one? Oh no, this is from a different person that was involved somewhere else, right?
and
Yeah.
that's the way, I guess, like enough lawyers practice law like that for so long, which is to say, we're just going to run up, either we're going to work off a retainer, or when we're going to do this hourly, or we're just going to give you a surprise in the mail at the end of the month, and you're probably not going to like it. Like, that was just kind of how things ran for a really long time. And I think there's a much greater demand for transparency and pricing. And in particular, there's a desire for flat fees, because I'm going to tell you everything that I'm going to do for you, and however long it takes me, or anyone that I'm working with, to get all of that work done, the amount you pay, you will know in advance, and you will pay nothing more than that amount, unless at some point during the process we just add work to what we originally agreed to do, and then we can figure out what to add to the overall price. And people really like that, and they respond to that. And maintenance in terms of keeping a plan up to date, that's what I think, like, people just don't have, historically, they haven't had a particularly good experience going through this whole process.
Right.
So, oh God, I'm so glad I got that stupid crap done. Like, now I don't have to worry about this anymore. I'm just going to put it up there on the shelf. And if that's the experience that you had, then who would want to like talk to the lawyer again to have to,
Pay another bill.
Yeah, pay another bill, to have to redo this stuff, go through thinking about this stuff again. Like, who wants to do that? So, so this way, then, because it's a way of encouraging people to do the right thing. Like, you should do the right thing because it's built into the price that I'm charging you up front. So,
right.
So there's a number of lawyers I know around the country who are starting to go more towards this model of planning, and I think that they're finding success in doing that.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I know I interrupted you, so sorry. I probably completely messed up your train of thought.
No. So, but that's it. So that's the reason. That's what I would say to the person who has already done some planning. It's time to, if you're not going back to that same lawyer who did the planning, and if you haven't even felt compelled to talk to them for an extended period of time, then maybe it's a good idea to look. You obviously don't have much of a relationship with them, so maybe it's okay to look for another lawyer. And I would encourage people like that to really like have a lawyer look over all of their stuff and really comb through it and see with them, is this right? Does this accurately reflect your wishes? Is there anything that's missing here? Are there any documents that I should have as part of this comprehensive plan that are just not there? I bet there are, because that's in my experience, when I'm looking at plans that are already done, I have a desire to almost start from scratch a lot of the time.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the best option. Yeah.
And sometimes it's the best option. Let's just start fresh, and you're going to have a whole new relationship with your lawyer, with me, which is to say, than you did with the guy who just gave you some documents and you were done with it, and you never even really wanted to think much about it anymore.
Yeah.
So there's that. And, either you can have a situation where a lawyer is updating those documents you already have and therefore charging you a little bit less, or you can start from scratch, right? But then look for somebody with a flat fee, because then you know exactly how much you're going to pay. So there's that. That's what I would say to the folks who already have planned. For the folks who never did plan, especially as you reach a later stage of life, either somewhere in the vicinity of the middle or even beyond the middle, obviously then it's I could say to the 20-year-old, hey, tomorrow is not promised. But odds are that unless, there's an accident or something terrible happens, then that 20-year-old is going to survive for a while. They don't have to worry about, medical things too much, whatever the situation is. They're assuming that they're just a generally healthy person, and nothing significant. They're going to stay that way, and they're going to live to see their 30s and their 40s and beyond. But if you're already there, right, and you're having medical procedures that weren't done before, and you like your body doesn't feel as good as it used to, and also, by the way, unlike the 20 something, you've accumulated a good amount of assets, both in terms of financial assets and in terms of family assets, for which you're responsible for all of them. Then there's a even more compelling, I'd say even a way more compelling reason to get to work as soon as possible and put a plan in place and start to think about these things. That's just in the sense of making sure that everything is taken care of. You have some control. The government is not going to decide where your money goes. Because, by the way, let me say this. If you are in the state of Illinois, and every single state is like this, they're just different levels at which this kicks in. But if you don't plan, in particular, if you don't have a trust, if you have a will but not a trust, and you have in your estate, which is just kind of a legal concept for all of the stuff that you own that has an economic value attached to it. If you, in the state of Illinois, and it's probably pretty similar in most places other than California, which has like people with significantly more wealth than in a lot of the rest of the country, if you have an estate worth $100,000 in the state of Illinois at the time that you die, that estate will have to be probated, whether or not you have a will. The only way around that, actually, the main way around that, and then there's a couple of exceptions that I dig into with people when we consult with each other. But the main way is to establish a trust, and that is how the only way really, like if you have assets up over $100,000 in Illinois, to avoid probate. And why do you want to avoid probate? That process. This is a process whereby, by the way, the state. Right, exactly. It's where the state, right, says what's going to happen to your property, and it's the state, meaning a judge specifically in probate court, who has to write orders saying this goes to this person has a legal right to this person has, and you literally have to go through all of the stuff that's in your estate, and decisions have to be made, and orders have to be written by the court about all of that stuff, so that it is like legally binding documents sending this change of property right to the person that it's supposed to go to. It's the court. And all of that is public. And guess what? All of it involves lawyers. And as we said before, lawyers are expensive. So what you end up doing is cutting out a piece of what you could have passed on financially. A good percentage of that. Depending on how much it is, it could be like 6%, 10%, even more than that sometimes. Now, if you have that could be significant assets, right?
Yeah, a lot of money. Yeah.
So by the way, what I do, my economic model is just to charge probably significantly less than what most people would end up paying if they just went through the probate process, right? You can pay a few $1,000s to work with me, and it just like how much they pay. It's not like most of my clients are between the ranges of like $2,000 and $10,000 in terms of like the money that they spend on work that I do with them. And whether it's 2,000 or it's 10,000, it has to do with the complexity of the planning that needs to be done, the complexity of the family situation, and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, that's specifically for building trusts. Because trusts are really complex documents, right? That are something like your own personal financial and health constitution, like you can think about it. Yeah, it's your governing document, right? Right. Your executive, legislative, and judicial.
And by the way, I've had people say, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to spend." You mean I have to spend like $2,000 or $10,000, and they have like $5 million. That they're trying to protect. And I'm like, guys, you're going to protect like all of this for $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is. When you do if you think it through and you do the math, and that's a lot of what financial planning is all about, right? Is sometimes we get emotional and we can't see the forest for the trees. A jar can't read its own label. You get emotional about your own personal situation. But if you have somebody that's a third party that can step in and kind of, okay, wait a second, let's do the math on this for just a second, right? and you just walk through it step by step. It's the same reason why I'm sure, like I don't do my own financial planning, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like, it's not a good idea. A doctor doesn't treat their family members, doesn't treat themselves. It's just not a good idea.
Yep.
I'm always amazed at what people think is, oh my goodness, that's too much money, when you look at the other side of it and you see how much they're protecting.
Yep.
And how much they stand to lose or to pay to, of all play. I don't know too many people that just love to give money to the government.
Right.
Not too many.
You're going to give and that's what you run into is court fees. Yeah. What you run into for sure are attorney fees. And if you have a lot of assets, if your assets are in the 7 figures, you need to start worrying about an estate tax, right? Which, by the way, there's a federal estate tax and there's a state level estate tax.
Of course, yes.
And different, how they work together depends on where you are. But the state estate tax is a far lower threshold for application than the federal estate tax. And the federal estate tax is actually now under discussion because of the current political, the political composition of Washington right now, which is, obviously majorities of both houses of Congress and the person in the White House right now are not happy with the historically high level, right, of threshold for the federal estate tax to kick in. So that's under discussion for a reduction, like to a lower threshold. And that would obviously start to affect a lot of people. Because if you didn't have an estate tax problem, you're still going to end up paying thousands of dollars in court fees and attorney fees and all kinds of stuff like that. Not to mention, by the way, the average probate process goes 6 to 12 months in the state of Illinois.
Right.
So that's, by the way, 6 to 12 months, you're waiting on the people who need your assets, who need the continuity, who aren't really keen about the idea of having all of your stuff aired out in public and become a part of permanent public record, all your financial life and everything like that, all your family fights, if there are any. You put people in a position where, by the way, fights do and can break out, right? Between family, things can get ugly when money's on the table.
The Cindy Arledge talks a lot about that too, and keeping the family relationship intact.
Yep.
And people don't necessarily think about that very often, but you can ruin lifetime relationships over. I know she tells a story of one that she was very familiar with, where it was over about $20,000.
Man, I like to say, I don't like to say this, but I do like to say this phrase is money makes monsters sometimes.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got people in your family who are suddenly, maybe they're like, you're talking about a windfall, however small. I mean, maybe it's $20,000, maybe it's less than that, maybe it's a lot more, but maybe a lot of people, you're putting people in a situation where they've never had that kind of windfall before. And I think it has the tendency to, it certainly has the potential to make people crazy. Yeah. And over the worst thing to get crazy about, so what great planning and foresight is good for is heading that situation off of the pass. Again, it's like that idea that I was talking about before of you pay the litigator to make your problem their problem. This is the example of you're paying me to not have a problem in the first place. I can't guarantee how people are going to act towards each other in your family, obviously down the road, and who knows what the hell is going to happen.
Right.
But what I can guarantee you is that I'm putting you and lawyers who do the kind of work that I do, put you in the best position to succeed, right, down the road, and have that avoidance of the kind of destructive conflict that tears families apart sometimes. Money makes monsters.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it. A lot of reasons, and it really comes down to cost. Do you want to pay to work with somebody like me a fraction of what you would ultimately pay to a lawyer and potentially even to the government if you had high enough asset value collectively? You would pay a fraction of that just to we can hang out and we'll talk and we'll ask big questions, and you'll feel good like about the whole process when you're done with it. I think that's a pretty good use, a way better use of, here court, here's a bunch of money, here attorney I don't really like and don't really care about, here's a bunch of money, here federal and or state government, here's a bunch of money.
And wait 6 to 12 months.
And wait 6 to 12 months. Everything's on hold for a while and everybody's struggling a little bit because of that. Like there's all of that is totally avoidable.
Yeah.
Right. And when you know all of that, when you know what could happen, because you actually took the time to think about it, you'll feel real good about doing this work when it's done. You might feel real good about it from the start. You're like, I'm so glad I'm now doing this because I feel like I am giving a gift. I'm doing the right thing, and I'm actually giving a gift to the people that I care about the most by making sure that it's as least likely as possible for all the problems that could arise to us.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Alex, this has been I try and keep my podcast, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I think we went a little longer than that, but it's because this is a really, number one, it's super important topic. Number two, obviously you are very knowledgeable and passionate, which is a great combination to have. And I want people to understand and know how to get in touch with you. So real quick, tell them exactly how to get in touch with you. And of course, if you reach out to me, I will be able to get in touch with Alex as well, and vice versa. But Alex, how's the best way to get in touch with you?
The most direct and quickest response is through email. That would be AK for Alexander Konetzki, AK@alexllc.co. And that's also my website. alexllc.co is the website. I encourage people to check that out. I made it myself. I put a lot of work into it. There's like really great pictures on it, so go check that out. If nothing else, you'll enjoy the pictures, you'll enjoy the art, and you can also just reach out directly by phone. My work phone, which will ring on my personal cell phone, is 312-884-9034.
One more time,
312.
Okay.
884-9034. I really need to put that in a jingle, don't I? I
know if we get like the Empire jingle or something like that, we'll get that going.
312-884-9034.
I love it. Yeah.
They're like, that's not memorable at all. I can't remember that. What was it? I don't know. It sounded good, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So that's how you get in touch with Alex. You can obviously, everybody knows that listens to this podcast on a regular basis. You can get in touch with me by texting the word life to 21,000. You'll get all sorts of really cool links, including the link to my calendar where you can book something at your convenience. And again, that's absolutely free. Or go out to guardianrockwealth.com and fill out the contact us information, and I will get right back with you within 24 hours or even quicker sometimes. So Alex, it's been awesome having you on. We're going to have to do this again and maybe pick a specific topic and drill down a little bit deeper or something like that, because this has been fun. I can tell you I've worked with Alex in the past, and now in this sort of new role that he's in, it's fantastic what he's doing. A little bit different, new way of legal advice. And again, just as a reminder, nothing on this podcast is to be considered personal, financial, or legal advice. For that, you need to contact us directly, and we'd love to talk to you. All right. Alex, we'll talk more later on.
I'm very excited to come back whenever you would you be so inclined to ask me. And maybe then the next time you can, maybe then by the next time, I'm going to have like a really cool text message contact thing like you have set up, because I'm so jealous of that. I really I need that in my life. I want people to be able to text a word and then all kinds of magic happens. That's great.
I'm a connector. I can get you that. I can take care of that for you.
I'm ready. And then next time I'll be able to give people my word.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah. I love it.
All right.
Cool.